All right, I don't know how well this is going to come off because I've been ill for about 8-9 days now, and the notes were made in a fever, and they're going to sound like that, and I'm in the midst of a slight fever right now. Fits right in with millennial fever. We seem to be in the middle of what might be called Millennium mania. Every direction we turn, we run into predictions or proclamations or panics or rumors and all sorts of proclamations, projections, and assertions. We hear about earthquakes, about plagues, economic collapses, wars, possessions of human beings and usurpations of our freedom by aliens or Muslims or Jews or Catholics or Freemasons or communists. Just about anybody you don't like, you can say, is trying to take over. Seems to be what the fever is now. What's interesting about a lot of these proclamations is that they're being made with great certitude, as if people really knew what was happening. This is especially curious because a lot of the people who are making proclamations about things they don't know anything about. So one is almost tempted to just dismiss the whole phenomenon altogether as a rumor or some kind of misnotion. I think that would be a great mistake. And it would be a great mistake just because of the fact of the phenomenon itself. When as many people are as excited as they are about a period in time, that is an important fact. It means that something is stirring in humanity. And so what I want to do is sort of wander back and forth through various different ideas about what is behind the conception of the millennia or the millennium change or the millennial change, and then look at several very serious issues. This is going to wind through all sorts of things, and it's going to take a taste of this and a taste of that. And so I don't know how well it'll come out. The fact is that a lot of people have deep concerns and are speaking out strongly about the world and changes in the world. Clearly, from a psychological point of view, that represents a symptom. It means that a lot of individuals have something ripe in their consciousness, or that there is a collective upsurgence from the unconscious, or both. In any of the cases, it's an indication of a symptom of psychological ripeness. As usual, when you start looking at projections of this sort, the projection says more about the projectee than it says about the world. That is to say, if we see financial collapse coming as part of the millennial change, it might indicate that somehow in our soul we're carrying some sort of burden of guilt about our greed and rapaciousness as far as financial things are concerned. If we see plagues coming for the world, it might be projecting awareness of our own inward negativity, spread wildly through all of humanity, that we see our own negativity coming ripe as potential illnesses, and it's so much easier, rather than face our own negativity, to project it outward and saying it's part of the millennium and it's happening in the millennium and it's not happening in me. Similarly, we could say the same thing about natural disasters. I don't think there's a person on the surface of the earth that doesn't believe that we're not raping the earth, that we're not suicidally destroying the environment that is needed for our continued existence on the surface of the earth. And we have guilty feelings about that. And when we have those kinds of guilty feelings, we project them outward. It's the story, for example, in Shakespeare's Macbeth. The story of Lord and Lady Macbeth projecting their guilt out in seeing ghosts that other people don't see. So we can say then that the millennium is a psychological phenomenon. But when we've said the millennium is a psychological phenomenon, what have we said? Not very much. You can make a whole life practice of looking at the psychological makeup of almost any circumstance. It's true that this is quite rapid and quite pronounced, but almost any circumstance must have some psychological background to it. Psychology, or logic of the soul, is an ingredient of all human endeavor. So, from looking at things psychologically, we can see that the millennium is something that is very widespread in the psyche of humanity, and it is something that is quite dramatic, because the projections that are coming out are quite strong or quite radical. Now, the thing about psychology is that psychology may or may not have anything to do with the fact of the matter or with the facts of the matter. We all know that very wondrous, very good things can be done from 6 psychologies. We know that Vincent van Gogh was a terribly disturbed man, but he turned out works of art that were wonderfully beautiful. Plus, we also know that some people who are psychologically sound make great blunders and put stuff out in the world that just isn't so. And we can, in Aristotelian style, we can finish out the whole square, and we can say that there are people that are both psychologically disturbed and wrong at the same time. And the final case would be, we could say, there are people who are psychologically healthy and who have the right opinion, which of course includes all of us. We're always healthy, the other people who aren't. So, to keep things simple, we've looked at one way of looking at the millennium psychologically. Just a touch of it, but it's going to be an afternoon of light touches. Now let's try to look at the relative facts concerning the millennium itself. A millennium is a period of 1,000 years. Nothing more, nothing less. A period of 1,000 years. Now that brings up the nitpicky issue of when does the millennium begin. The third millennium of the Christian era begins on January 1st, 2001. It does not begin in the year 2000. Because of the way years are ordered, when we went from the era BC to the era AD, there was no year 0. We started right out with year 1. And that means we will not have, or we did not complete 1,000 years until the year 1000 was completed. And we entered the second millennium in the year 1001. Similarly, if a millennium is a period of 1,000 years, in order to enter the third millennium, the third period of 1,000 years, that does not occur until the year 2001. It would be different if it were like regular cardinal numbers, where things go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 and such like that. All right, now we've got that little issue out of the way. We want to begin to examine the relevance of millennia at all. And so we're going to look very briefly, not comprehensively, at a number of issues surrounding the whole idea of the millennium. The first issue is, was Jesus really born in the year 1 AD? This is a difficult question because our millennia are supposedly based on the birth year of Jesus. And so it becomes a question to ask, was Jesus born in the year 1 AD? First of all, the ideal way to determine the matter would be for all of us to be well-trained clairvoyants. And with well-trained clairvoyants, we could look and see what the astronomical and other phenomena of the time were at the time of Jesus' birth, and we would know precisely what year, according to our modern reckoning, Jesus was born. However, controlled, well-trained clairvoyants are not very often found. I have maybe met one or two in my entire life. And this is people, and we're not talking about psychics or I had a vision last night or something like that. We're talking about people who are trained observers. Since we don't have that, we have to use scholarly and speculative evidence. When it comes to that, there is scarce little scholarly evidence to indicate that Jesus lived at all. This is something that has been gone over. The two primary physicians of the time that were writing, that mention or even distantly reference the birth of Jesus or the life of Jesus are Cornelius Tacitus, the Roman historian, and Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian that was given Roman citizenship. Both of them allude to the existence of someone like Jesus, but there is no scholarly evidence to say that Jesus existed. Now, you might say that the simplest and most vague way that you can say that Jesus existed is because there were eyewitness accounts of his existence, such as the Gospels. I frankly think a person would have to be a fool to doubt the existence of Jesus in the face of the Gospels and in the face of the religions that have sprung out from the existence of such a person. But it wouldn't be surprising because there are major religions in the world right now that are a result of science fiction books. I can think of two of them. one of which would shock you to know that it was a result of science fiction. I don't want to get into any religious difficulties, so I'll just pass on that. From a mystical point of view, and I am an aspiring mystic, from a mystical point of view, the Gospels are not either history or biography. They are not intended to be stories of the life of Jesus. Anyone who tells you otherwise is making a serious error. The Gospels are something much more like sacred myths. They represent formulae for Christian students to unfold the experience of Christ in their own life. They represent manuals of initiation and not statements of the life of Jesus. Now, this is going to be, again, I'm going to tantalize you with all sorts of little interesting things. But we don't have time to, again, be comprehensive. But just to illustrate a few little tiny points. If we look at the Gospel of Matthew and at the Gospel of Luke, each of them has a completely different lineage for Joseph, the natural father of Jesus. Two different lineages. This means that somebody had to be greatly wrong, or something very different is being done than giving a biography. This fact gets complicated when you look at Matthew's Gospel, and it says that Jesus was born of a woman who had not known a man, implying something like a virgin birth. And by a virgin birth, it is not meant parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis is when an egg is self-fertilized. So this brings out all kinds of questions. Because of all of the people in the world, the Jews were the most careful and the most scrupulous about keeping family lineages. And both of the writers, Matthew and Luke, were Jewish. And clearly they knew about lineages and they wouldn't put down something bogus. Then if Jesus was born of a virgin, why have a lineage anyway? So you see, there are a lot of really interesting questions about the Gospels. And if it was parthenogenesis, Jesus would have to be a girl. Because it is not possible by the process of parthenogenesis to produce a boy. The stuff just isn't there to do it. So Jesus would had to have been a little girl rather than a little boy. So we have some really interesting questions, very interesting questions. I'll just mention some things. From a mystical point of view, if we look at the sacred myths all over the world, from the Devamatri and Swabhavat, or if we take the Light of Asia and the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and numerous others, we find them born to a virgin. This is an astrological symbol for one thing, but it is also a spiritual symbol for another. Mystics claim that since the time of the fall, when we took procreation into our own hands and did so selfishly and have become increasingly sensual, we have fallen into matter in such a way that our focus is in materialism, and we have all but lost our spiritual connection. Since then, it is as the curse or as the blessing probably better, a statement of fact from the book of Genesis. Since then, we are born to sin and suffering. From a mystical point of view, to be born of a virgin means that some people have gotten far enough along that they are not moved by personal sexual passion. And they can conceive a child without selfishly, sensuously indulging. They do it as a holy act, and this is in all religions that this takes place. And when that occurs, there is what is called an immaculate conception. I'll mention some other things. To be conceived by the Holy Ghost means something very different than most people think. The being that is called the Holy Ghost, Jehovah, is the most highly evolved of the angelic life wave. And one of the activities of the angelic life wave is the conception of new life forms. And that every time that there is a union that is to be productive, what happens is that the information from all the past physical bodies is put into the sperm, and the information from all the past etheric bodies is put into the ovum. And they're brought together at just the right moment in the cosmos so that the child can go through the intrauterine period and be born at a time harmonious with its development. In special cases, the highest of all the angels does this work. That is the Holy Spirit. And so to be conceived by the Holy Spirit means that the work of bringing together all of the records from past lives is done by the being that probably knows more about that activity than anyone in the cosmos. It is a very high honor. Oh, come on in. All right. We've looked a little at the idea Hello. That's all right. Hello. We've looked a little bit into the idea that Jesus most likely did exist. I think it would be preposterous of the divine to set forth a salvation for humanity and by intention put it forward through something that was a non-event, a non-existent activity. But I think we've also established that there are a lot of questions about the Gospels, and that the Gospels are meant as formulae for initiation and to take them too literally as either historical or bibliographical fact is to miss a great deal. Now, some clairvoyants have given times for the birth of Jesus. And strangely enough, most of them agree. Probably one of the more reliable of them is Rudolf Steiner. And Rudolf Steiner does not give a year, though he hints at it, and some of his followers who are astrosophers, meaning studying the wisdom of the heavens or of the stars, according to them, Jesus was born in September in the sign of Libra. I have no difficulty with that at all. In fact, that's what most clairvoyants seem to come up with. Now, at this point, I should mention that there's a very big difference between Jesus Christ, and Christ Jesus. we're talking of four very different things. Jesus was a human being. Clairvoyants have traced that human being back through a number of lives, including that of Solomon. And if we can believe Paul, who did see in the third heaven, that Jesus was none other than the original Adam. Christ is a being of a much different order. The most highly evolved being of the archangelic life wave, which is 2 steps advanced beyond us in the great creative dance. That being, Christ, utilized the personality of Jesus during the 3 years' ministry. So then, Jesus Christ is Jesus awakened in the Christhood of his own being. And Christ Jesus is the composite being, the personality of Jesus with the individuality of the Christ being. But what we're still trying to do, we're still trying to locate the millennium, but we're still, this may be a little bit lengthy. So what we're saying is the best that we get from clairvoyance is a September birth for Jesus, which is, I have no trouble with it at all. In fact, I think if you look in the Theosophical Astrologer, Alan Leo gives somewhere a nativity for Jesus, and I believe he got that nativity from Rudolf Steiner, because I believe Alan Leo and Rudolf Steiner had something of a friendship between the two of them. So we really don't know whether Jesus was born in 1 AD or not, whether that was the September or not. That leaves us only with other kinds of speculation. Yes?
I just wanted to point out that the Urantia book gives Jesus' birth as the 21st of August in the year 7, I think.
Yeah, the Urantia book, in my estimation, and I'm saying this on the record, is not a very reliable source of mystical information or of factual information of any kind. I'm sorry if it's your religion, but it's a book that does too much flattery to me. But that's neither here nor there. So all we have left are conjecture or speculation. And there are a lot of things that you can do with conjecture. In fact, it would be a wonderful thing if somebody did a study on all of the different ways that people have tried to figure out the birth time of Jesus. One of the things that is used is astronomy. People trace various different astronomical cycles. And most of those people agree that Jesus was likely born in 4 BC, in that round conjunction between Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. Very bright, very close conjunction between the three of them. Another way that you can conjecture is from the cycle of Sabbaths, which is again one of the very best kept records in history, versus the solstice. That is to say, we know the days of the week for the Last Supper and the Passover, and by putting that together with the solstice, and because the cycle of Sabbath is not always occur on the same days of the week, as far as when Passover occurs, and that narrows it down to several years only that it could have been. But roughly speaking, Jesus was probably born sometime between 4 BC and 3 AD, a 7-year period roughly. That's not so bad when you think about it. Not a bad accuracy when we're thinking now 2,000 years later. But with our current knowledge, that is again without direct observation from clairvoyance, we do not know precisely when Jesus was born. Then comes the really interesting question, the type that some kid would likely come up. Does it make any difference when Jesus was born? And I'm asking that seriously. One answer, the answer that Jesus would give, certainly it does. But if Jesus was not born in the year 1 AD, does that void the meaning of the beginning of the millennium on January 1st, 2001? Strangely, from a mystical point of view, if Jesus was born in anywhere in that 7-year period, it doesn't make any difference in terms of the millennium. Now, I'm trying to be provocative in all of this. And in order to get at that, we have to let go of a way of thinking that we have that is somewhat biased by the world. We have a lot of partisanship in the world, and a person cannot be partisan and a seeker of the truth. Only a whole person can be a fulfilled truth seeker. If we are partisan, we are at best half of a person. Things swing back and forth between the left and the right, and good things come with each swing. If we're partisan, we see only the bad in the adversary and not the good. And we see only the good in ourselves and not the bad. Partisanship has no place in truth-seeking. In truth-seeking, we need to be free. We can only see and choose and act out the truth if we're free. Now, as truth seekers, most of us have intuitively, because it's again something that can only be apperceived with a deep state of spiritual vision, but most of us have accepted the notion of cause and consequence. If you once accept cause and consequence, karma if you wish, your life is changed forever. When we realize once that cause and consequence works, we realize that everything that happens in our lives that we are responsible for, as it applies to us, is just. If we get ill, it's just. If we win the lotto, it's just. We have no complaints. Then we have to recognize that karma, or cause and consequence, or destiny, whatever you wish to call it, is not limited to personal activities alone. History is also part of karma. We're part of something that's ongoing. Nor are we alone the only participants in this great creation that we are working in. There are other beings, some of which are much closer to the divine than we are, and are much more creators of the cosmos and much less spectators than we are. So when you once accept cause and consequence, then you have to accept that things that happen in destiny happen with a purpose, for a reason. There are no accidents, none at all. There's creativity so that we can put in totally new causes or change old ones, And there's hard line cause and consequence, but there are no accidents. This is especially so from the larger view of history. So when somebody like a John Kennedy dies and a Lyndon Johnson precipitates us into the Vietnam War, this is because history had to have it that way. There are things that are needed for our experience, for our working out of destiny, individual and collective, and that's the way things come out. So suppose there was a mistake somewhere along the line, and the person said, well, Jesus was born in what we now call 1 AD. That was not a mistake. If there is supposed to be a harmony to the numbers, so that the years are numbered as they are numbered, that person's mistake fits right into the intention of the cosmos. So it doesn't make any difference whether Jesus was born in 1 AD or not. You know, if we were doing a strict historical connection, it would. We can't say history is bogus. So from this point of view, yeah, is it getting stuffy? Oh, there's storm windows on. Oh, great. There's a nice wind out there. Oops. I think you have to pull the elbows back in, don't you? Oh, okay. All right. Let's start looking at things from another point of view. A few minutes ago, trying to be provocative, I said a millennium is a period of 1,000 years, nothing more, nothing less. In another way, I was pointing to something trivial, and the word 1,000 years was to the ancients shorthand. It was something like the 10,000 things in the Chinese tradition. 1,000 years just means a long time, or it means an age, or something like that. But I was trying to get at something even more than that. And that is when I said 1,000 years, a millennium is 1,000 years, nothing more, nothing less. I was trying to give an attitude. The attitude of the skeptical, materialist, rationalist. To the rationalist of that nature, one moment is identical to every other moment. The only thing that is different about it is the name. Now it is 2:05, then it becomes 2:06. And for the rationalist, that seems to be the truth of things. And it's a sad thing that for most of us, time is a theoretical concept, and in our consciousness, one moment is very much like the next. One day is very much like the next. That is because we have not yet awakened our consciousness to what is going on. The tone of one moment or of one day is very much like the tone of any other moment or any other day. When we really awaken, or as we really awaken, we see it is very much different than that. We see that time is flavored. And in the same way that space is a womb that takes shape according to the forms that are manifest in it, the other pole of potential, time, also has flavor according to what is manifest within it. So time-space is a potential. It is a potential that is between what definitively is and everything that is and isn't. And when you speak about the absolute, you're talking about something that is all encompassing. Things are made manifest. No, that's I think what caused. I just drank some, and that caused my body temperature to change, and I'm just barely hanging on right. Time-space is a womb whereby we take all the multifarious things of existence and non-existence of the absolute and bring them into manifest cosmic existence. So time-space is it could be where things come in. It's something like, the potential of time-space is something like the potential of light. Light has within it everything, all of the elements, all of the flavors in color. And everything we see around us is a condensation of light. Light holds it all like a womb. In a much more subtle way, in a much more transcendent way beyond that, space is, or time-space, is a womb wherein things come into existence, including time, including light. I don't know how much time any of you spends going into the silence, into the unknown, and finding it to be filled, finding it to be replete with this or that, or with this or that potential. But time does have a flavor. In fact, we're going to talk about two kinds of flavoring. One is direct and quasi-concrete, and that is called cosmological time or cosmological flavoring of time. The other is reflective. It's quasi-abstract, and it's indirect, and it's sometimes called symbolic time. I'll just mention the direct to begin with, and then I'll drop it and pick it up later. Direct time is like saying there's a flavor to spring, followed by the flavor of summer, winter, and then all the things that are produced within those flavors. This is cosmological. We can trace the causes for spring, for summer, for winter, and we can even follow cosmological things like El Niño cycles. And we can see what they're related to. That's the direct kind of flavoring of time. Now we come to the other, which is not real pleasing to me, but we have to go into it. And that is reflective or abstract flavoring to time. And we understand reflective flavoring of time by understanding esoteric mathematics or, to some extent, numerology. Numbers, the ideas that are numbers, represent states of being within spirit. And these ideas have qualities or flavors, just like things have qualities and flavors. Everything takes place within the general chaotic womb of potential. The egg, the great big cosmic goose egg, the number 0. Everything is in a state of unified oneness there. The one thing that is common to everything in potential or in actual or in becoming is being or beingness. So the number 1 has the quality of existence. Everything is divisible by 1. Every number is divisible by 1. 1 is indivisible by anything. So that all we can get is a fraction if we try to divide 1. So there is a distinct character to the number 1. Or to what?
Start with 0.
There is an indistinct flavor to the number 0 or to the figure 0, where everything is still in a chaotic potential state. Similarly, each other number has a conscious quality about it. When we are awake in oneness, when we can say, I am, there still is an awareness of the possibility that there may be things that are not manifest. And once we have this consciousness that there could be things that are not manifest, we have automatically internalized duality. So that there's now a distinct difference between what is and what isn't. Or what is more this way or more that way. So that the number 2 has, has about it the character of polarity, of dualism, of separation, of always great uncertainty. You're more certain of the fact that you are, but more uncertain about what isn't. And so each number has a distinct character about it. We could carry, as the Pythagoreans did, and count all the way from 1 to 10, and go from unity to an internal division, to a spiritual manifest perfection, and you could live through all of the numbers. You could do it by the Pythagorean triangle, the 1 dot, and then the 2, and then the 3, and then the 4, and you have counted from 1 to 10. We still have this yet. We still teach our children, if they're going to get angry, stop and count from 1 to 10, not realizing that what we're doing is introducing them to pagan mathematical philosophy, that we're teaching them to be little Pythagoreans. I think it's wonderful myself. Anytime you get anybody to stop when they're about to get angry and conceive the whole universe from beginning to complete manifestation, you've done something wonderful. I'm not going to talk about each of the numbers. I'll come back a little bit and talk about 2 and 3 again. But the whole idea is, in indirect mathematics, in the ideas, mathematical ideas of numbers, there are qualities and flavors. It's a little bit shallow way to go at it, but I don't want to do anything else. There are 2 poles to the number 1. The number 1 is either the point, ruled by Saturn, or the whole business ruled by the sun. According to the Pythagoreans, the point meant position in being. Putting a point down is like saying, I am, and I am here, and I am now. So there is something about referencing. And referencing is absolutely necessary. When we deal with the cosmos, we're dealing with so much that's going on so many levels that are parallel and analogous to each other, that what we're dealing with is something that requires a good focus of where you're at and what levels are beyond you and what levels are within you or are smaller. So a point represents a locator, a decimal point. So if we think of years as being significant, which I think is a very sensible thing to do, as the years change, it's something like an odometer in your car. It turns over from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, and then it clicks the next one up. It starts all over again. And the idea of indirect flavoring of time is that periods of time have qualities, and those qualities are associated with the numbers that are used to reckon their position in the passage of time. Not a bad idea, a pretty good idea altogether. If we have a decimal point, then numbers to the left of the decimal point by our convention, each digit represents a larger cycle in the cosmological process. You know, we spin around a little cycle. After so many times, that little cycle has gone one cycle, and so on, going all the way up to the size of the Milky Way galaxy, or even more. And so what we're saying is that to the right of the decimal point, we go down, the numbers go the other way. So that fractions represent smaller cycles, so small that in our current consciousness we often don't relate to them. They might relate better to the cells of our body. We have something like the Krebs cycle in the liver, which takes something in terms of milliseconds that we go through the entire cycle, and it's vital to our health altogether. And so we have these kinds of cycles. And so that's what we're trying to point at here. This system that we just looked at is a decimal-based system with 0. These kinds of systems were common all over the ancient world. The one that is used in the Bible, for example, talking about 666, is a base 7 system, and there's no 0 used. So that things go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the next one kicks up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in a lot of these systems, different numbers relate definitely to different spheres of activity in the spiritual world and to beings that have their home and their nature in those spheres, and the things that they have in common are indicated by the quality of the number that indicates them. I don't want to go too much into that, just a little side trip. So, we're interested in something that does use zeros. We're interested in the year 2000 and the year 2001. If the lowest digit is here in now, we are about to change a digit 3 levels up. It's like saying this is something pretty big. You know, it's like when you're watching your car turn over. Have you ever watched your car turn over? It was all nines. You know, you're cheering for it. You know, it's a big time thing. I even think a lot of that is what is involved in millennial fever. People cheering for things to to go on. So we are entering a period where for 2,000 years we will be dominated by the number 2. And at the beginning of it, it will be 2 and nothing else. In the year 2000, everything will be dominated by 2. No subcycles, only that one big 2. This says that there is a parting of the ways. That if there is anything to esoteric mathematics in its numerological manifestation, which is a question that is open to me and to a lot of other people, it would say that this would be a time of great division. Great division dividing us as to where we come down. But this is in the year 2001, the third millennium begins, such that if the first millennium were just the physical experience of Jesus, and the second millennium was a beginning to work out more of the social, more of the in-between things between us, the third millennium would indicate the opportunity to look at things in the Spirit. The year 2001 is a 3 year, and 3 is the number of perfection. 3 is the number of the simplest intuitive understanding of anything. We cannot know where we are in time or space with any knowledge without the number 3. We know that we are not in the past, not in the future, but here. We're at the third point. Relative to space, in any number of dimensions, the smallest number of lines that begins to enclose space is 3 lines crossing each other, and then you have the division of what is between those 3 lines versus what is outside. So there is objective awareness. Everything from the positioning of satellites to being lost in the woods and finding your way home depends on the principle of triangulation. To know who we are spiritually, we have to know our Divine Father, our Divine Mother, and ourself. When we have the baptism by the Holy Spirit, when we come into knowing our self-consciousness, we know that relative to the divine will and the divine imagination. To be born into self is to be born into God, and is to be born into the real nuclear family, the one that really counts. It may help us to grow up in a family where there's a father and a mother, and we can see that we're a result of that, but the real nuclear family is the spiritual one, the transcendent one. So that in the third millennium is when we can actually begin to do manifest knowing spiritual work. Not just knowing about matter, but knowing ourselves spiritually. So there's something very finalizing. Body, soul, spirit, 1, 2, 3. Numerologists go so far as to claim that the numbers carry right down to the month, day, year you were born, and the letters in your name and everything else. There may be something to it. I find vague things to it, but having studied astrology and can get at all of the really detailed information, it is it's not as clear to me because it's not as direct, which means we're going back to the other direct view now. We're going to start looking at astrology. we said that there were two ways that time is flavored. One, indirectly. The very naming of the years gives them some of the quality of the idea of the number that they are named by. It's a really interesting notion. If you think about it, this is what makes most marriages difficult, because there's two, right? There's my point of view and yours your point of view, and yours happens to be right. That's how it goes in a marriage. So when there, some people even claim, I don't too much like to get into magic, but the number, if we were to put the fact that there are four corners standing out on this table, has something to do with the way the work would be carried out on this table. When King Arthur made his table a round table so that everyone would be equal and that there would be no head at the table, it was with wonderful wisdom, great insight into that he did that. All right, but the trouble is we have become cosmological thinkers. Science has come along and we follow cause to effect, to being new cause to new effect. And with that consciousness, we have a cosmological way that if we say this happened, we want to see what caused it. We can't say that with numerology because we're always bringing in something from the abstract. There is a magical quality that something is indeed brought in from the abstract, but if you try to drive your car down the street by the abstraction, the police officer will very rightly give you a ticket. You're supposed to be in control and you're supposed to cause that car to go where you want it to go. It means a very cosmological relationship with society and what's going on. Astrology provides that, though I'm not going to get into a big discussion about how astrology works, how the forces are brought from deep in the cosmos into being, but we'll just assume, it's dangerous, but we'll assume that astrology works just to make some points so we can see what is going on. There are four primary elements to astrology. There are signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, which represent fields of attitude. They are each sign a complete myth in itself, a complete cosmos in itself, but biased. All of the signs have courage, but maybe not as much as Aries. All of the signs have humility, but maybe not as much as Pisces. There are houses, and houses represent fields of opportunity, the opportunity to experience something, to make money or to lose money, or to be educated by a great teacher, or to have good friends, or to spend a lot of time just sitting around talking. Those kinds of opportunities are indicated by houses. The relationship of signs to houses indicates what kind of qualities are the background for what kinds of opportunities. If you have something like a watery sign on something like the second house, water deals with life and the second house deals with money. It may mean that you make your money by working with living things. Planets are the foci. Planets are what focus the energy of the signs, those qualities, into the forms of the houses. The planets are the doers. Each one is a specialist. An organ, like Mercury is the organ of thinking, and Sun is the organ of selfhood, and Venus is the organ of loving, and so on. And there are aspects. And aspects are the modes of doing things, the tools, the talents, the how you go about doing something. We're trying to understand the dynamics in time, and there are all sorts of astrological things we could do to talk about the millennium, but we're going to talk about just one. And that is, we're going to talk about planetary cycles, and only one kind of planetary cycle, a binary planetary cycle. I'm trying to get to things that are really important here, and we're trying to get to things of significance about our life and our times, so if you don't mind bearing with, we must be at least halfway through all of this now, so... Yeah. As we see, every day and every night, things are accomplished cyclically. In nature, there is a period of activity we call a day. And then nature rests at night, though some of nature is more active at night while the other parts are resting. Everything in the world is accomplished by cycles. One of the most common cycle that we see is the diurnal cycle. Every day we see it go from day to night, and night follows day, and day follows night, and it goes on forever that way. The next most common cycle happens more than the cycle of the seasons, is the cycle of the moon. Every month we see the moon start out as a little sliver and get bigger and bigger until it's full. And then it gets small again. This is one of the most universal cycles of all. Everything that is accomplished in the world from an astrologer's point of view is accomplished by the cycle of the moon. Other planets, other stars may be effecting changes in the cosmic environment, but when things are finalized, they're finalized by the sun and the moon. Every astrologer from every society, every period of history has come to the conclusion that the cycle of sun and moon is a cycle of accomplishment. Now that's a rough way of saying it. When we look up there, we see a lovely heavenly body get bigger and bigger, and then we see it get smaller and smaller again. It's a lovely kind of observation, but we have to be more keen in our observation if we are going to be spiritual students. We have to be more subtle. The spiritual worlds and the experience of the spiritual worlds is not a set of dramatic fireworks. There may be fireworks, but the important part is the ability to see what's going on, to see through things. And if we do that, we can see within the moon cycle how the cycle works. And we don't have to be geniuses. My own father, who has a 6th grade education, observed the moon cycle and was very, very keen on it and very much improved his business and his lifestyle just by watching the moon as it was getting bigger and as it was getting smaller. The poet, German poet, Johann Goethe, used to be able to look out of a window, one little corner of a window like that, and by knowing the phase of the moon and looking at what was happening with the clouds, he could tell you what the weather was going to be for the next 2 or 3 days. For simplicity, let's say that at the new moon, the sun stands still. The sun and moon are together at new moon. The moon is invisible. let's just say the sun stays still all the time, no matter how many thousands of miles it's going. From our point of view, or relative to the moon, it's standing still. A week later, at the first quarter of the moon, the sun is square to the moon. 2 weeks later, we have a full moon. And then it starts getting small again. And at that quarter, it is. So this describes a moon cycle in a really slow way. It takes 14 days from the moon being with the sun until the moon is in exactly the opposite side of the heavens and is full up. So the way this goes in terms of observation is during the first half of the cycle, the sun gives its light to the moon. And the sun is the builder. And so it is using the moon as a shuttlecock. The moon is taking the energy from the sun and building and accomplishing. When the moon gets far away from the sun, it exerts its own nature. So that at the full moon, we have traditionally, from astrological observation the world over, we have things like this is the time of suckling animals and howling bitches and magic, all of those kinds of activity. Then the moon gives its light back to the sun as it gets smaller. So there is a constant giving out and getting back of light. You could say that in some ways the sun gives its light to the moon and the moon receives it or takes it in. That's one way of looking at it. The sun is willing its light and the moon is reflecting it. Another way of looking at it is, since the two poles are equal to each other, is that the moon is drawing out the sun and the sun is releasing or letting go. Either way of looking at it is the same. It is that the manifest work is being done, the active work is being done in the first half of the cycle. The reflective work is being done in the second half of the cycle. If you want a good, really brief, pretty poetic treatise, if you look in Dante's Inferno, he mentions this there in just one sentence almost, I think it is, maybe 3 sentences, about the active versus the contemplative life, or the active versus the reflective life. So no matter what's happening on in the cosmos, if something new is going to be started to become manifest, it will be done under a new moon. And if one is going to assimilate or rework things from the past, that would be begun under a full moon. Now, if we take this idea and apply it to any 2 planets, it works. This is a really very shortened thing. This is normally a talk that I give that's an hour and a half long in itself. I'm trying to run it through here in about 5 or 10 minutes. But any 2 planets work this way. I'll give you one example because it's one of the clearest ones that stands out in history. The Pluto and Uranus cycle. In astrology, Pluto rules the extreme right. It rules everything from the right of the Republican Party, no matter what religion, it's the right-wingers, it's the conservatives, it's actually the reactionaries. So it rules everything from the Ku Klux Klan to the Hells Angels to the black Muslims. It is very, very conservative. Uranus, on the other hand, is the extreme left. It's everybody's. Even the communists look mild to the Iranian. They believe in complete anarchy. Like the only way you can get anything done is in complete freedom, no controls of any kind. So then, the cycle between Uranus and Pluto should describe the cycle of conservatism versus the cycle of radicalism. In the year 1850, when these two planets conjoined, Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital, but it didn't have any effect. This cycle takes about 104 years to go through an entire cycle. It varies. During the first half of that cycle, then from 1850 through about the time of the First World War, Pluto ruled. And during the period that Pluto ruled, it was even called in the United States the plutocratic society. There was great wealth, there was great power, there was great conservatism, and it was trust after trust after trust building up these huge, huge, big corporations. There was a dramatic swing to the right in the United States and in other places in the world. Then comes the opposition, and Uranus takes over. And when Uranus takes over, it is the time of the Russian Revolution. The IWW, Trotskyites, insurgencies, and it continues on that way until in the third quarter of the cycle, it was the whole, in the United States, the whole liberalism, the Roosevelt years, all of the things of civil rights. We lived through a lot of that. And then came another conjunction, a back and forth conjunction. And in that back and forth conjunction, what marks the beginning and end of it were the Detroit riot and the Watts riot. And within 1 year's time, everything went from civil rights to black power and white backlash. And since then, we are now again in the Pluto stage of the cycle. What's happening? I think there are about 6 companies left, aren't there? Everybody else is merged. And it's, again, we haven't even reached the epitome of it yet. Things have gone very far to the right. And will continue that way, I think, well into the next century. All right, that's just an example that everybody can see because it's a real simple, obvious example. So this kind of a situation makes a quartered moon cycle, such that in the first quarter it is sun, because everything's closest to the sun and the sun is ruling. In the second part of the cycle, the sun is still ruling, but it's going toward the moon. So the second quarter is sun primary rulership, moon secondary rulership. When you get to the third quarter, it's all moon. Moon is giving, and the moon is ruling. Everything on this side is more moonlight than sunlight. Everything on this side is more sunlight than moonlight. Everything here is, and so that this quarter is moon, sun. All right. No, this just one here is once a month. Yeah, but the Pluto Uranus, you can check it astronomically and historically. I've just got piles and piles of this stuff that I don't bother so much with the dates anymore because all I care about are the ideas.
Won't that vary considerably because of strange orbit?
Yes, it does. Yeah. All right. Now we're getting down to where after all this time, we're getting down to where we want to be. In April and May of the year 2000, there will be an exceedingly exceedingly, exceedingly, exceedingly rare astronomical phenomenon. 1 in 4 years. 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 1 in 4 this is something that we're talking about in terms of these planetary cycles, since Pluto is the slowest of all the planets that we know of right now. Pluto can dominate the most cycles. So sometime in May of the year 2000, I'm going to make a symbolic diagram. We will have Pluto. And Pluto will be giving to Neptune, meaning that they'll be in first stage. Neptune will be giving to Uranus, so Pluto will be giving to both Neptune and Uranus, so they'll both be in first stage. And we will have Saturn. That is, Pluto will be giving to Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn. Neptune will be giving, so it goes just like that. After the conjunction in the May of the year 2000, the next planet in line will be Jupiter. And the next one for 1 week will be Mars. This means that for part of May of the year 2000, all of the outer planets outside of the Earth will be in first phase. Exceedingly rare phenomenon. Exceedingly rare. You find conjunctions all over the place, but nothing where everything is in first phase. You can put it in a computer. I haven't done it yet. But it's many thousands of years before you will find things in this in this stage of a cycle where that many planets are in the first phase. So we'll come back to this in just a second, because I got a little energy left yet, and I want to go into a few other things, and then we're going to get to the important stuff of the day, right? That's all. Mars conjoins Saturn and Jupiter before they finish their conjunction. That happens in April of the year 2000. And it goes opposite of Pluto in, I believe, the last week of May or the first week of June. So this is a rare, rare phenomenon. There's also...
Weather is so strange right now.
Yeah.
What causes would there be?
Well, I have a whole bunch of things I want to get to yet here, so... Let's talk about the ladder of the stars. Does everybody know what the ladder of the stars is? Oh, I guess we can do this on the side here. From the earth out to the heavens, there used to be what was called the ladder of the stars, Jacob's ladder. And on this ladder, the faster the planet moves, the closer it is considered to be to the Earth. So that the bottom rung of the ladder is the Moon, and then Mercury, and then Venus, and then the Sun, then Jupiter, then Mars, then Jupiter, then Saturn, and then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. This was called the ladder of the stars. The part from the Sun down to the Earth is called the personal segment. Part from Pluto all the way out is considered the impersonal segment. These represent stages of development, such that the first thing that we overcome in our spiritual growth is the moon, our biological nature. Then we get a hold of our mind, and then our desires, and then we come to selfhood. Sun meaning self-consciousness. But each of these represents a different level of development, such that when you get way out here, Saturn was the last star that most planets had to get beyond, because when you got to the octave planets, then you were considered divinely and spiritually free. And the what was called the crystallium was ruled by Uranus. The firmament was ruled by Neptune, and finally the unmoved mover, the primum mobile, was ruled by Pluto. So these not only relate to planets, but they relate to different levels in the spiritual worlds moving out from the earth. And so what we're speaking of is the desire of moving free from the earth and moving out to the spiritual realms to draw new things to come in and have new things go out. In this activity, conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter were always considered significant, because Saturn is sort of the gatekeeper to the outer creative spiritual realms. And when there was a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, it said something new was coming into the cosmos and something old was being ushered out. And so astrologers for many thousands of years have studied conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter. There are at least 4 levels of conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter. A simple conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter occurs every 20 years. And that is rightfully considered a generation, is 20 years. So once a generation this occurs. Now the quality of it is that if Saturn and Jupiter conjoin at 0 degrees of Aries, 20 years later, on the average, they'll conjoin 243 degrees forward. That is, they will. The next one would be in 3 degrees of Sagittarius, and then the next one would be in 6 degrees of Leo, and then 9 degrees of Aries, and such. And those are called. So they're roughly trine to each other. And you can see diagrams from astronomers going all the way back to the Persians, where they have these triangles drawn of where in the heavens the conjunctions occur. So a second level Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is when they change elements. Aries, Sagittarius, and Leo are fiery signs. And so when one occurs in the very first degree of Aries, the next one will be in a fiery sign, and they will persist that way for several hundred years in one element. And then bingo, they'll go to a new element, and then they'll spend several hundred years in the new element. And a third level is when they have gone through all 4 elements and start all over with the first fiery element again. And I forget how that's, I think something like 1,700 years or something like that, but it's in the thousands of years. And when it goes all the way around the zodiac and it comes into the Aries, into the fiery sign at the first degree of Aries the first time, that is a 4th level. That happens once, like in 24,000 years. And I believe that the one that occurred in 4 BC was of that nature, but don't quote me on that because I don't have figures in front of me. For the past several hundred years, the conjunctions have been in, Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions have been in earthy signs. And the first one that occurred in the 8th house of the United States chart. And the 8th house is the house of death. And every president that has been elected under a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in an earthy sign, including the first one, has died in office. Ronald Reagan didn't die, but Ronald Reagan was elected under a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which was the first one of an Aries sign, which had to do with the fifth house, which has to do with speculation and education and things of that nature. The conjunction that is coming up in May of 2000 is the last one of the earthy signs. There was an anomaly there that it went Earth, 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 and then first air, and then it has the last Earth. So it is the ending of a way of consciousness. Things are going from Earth consciousness to air consciousness. It is a major level. So not only is May of the year 2000 important in terms of the planetary cycles, which is major importance, but it is also a changing of an element. And a changing of an element, I believe, toward a higher spiritual education. I have all kinds of material that I'm cutting out of here because otherwise we'd be here way too long and I don't think I'd have the energy to carry it all off. So, from mid-September 1999, when Mars conjoins Pluto, until late May of the year 2000, when it comes opposite to Pluto, Mars will be translating light between all of the outer planets. It is an exceedingly significant time. So what we're saying is there anything to the millennium? The name of this talk was supposed to be, is there any truth to the millennium? Well, if esoteric mathematics is true, and if destiny has worked it so that the numbers of the years are as they are supposed to be, it's likely that there is both indirect and direct significance about the years 2000 and 2001. All right, now we've got the trash out of the way, and we can get to what's important. We can see there is significance. I think most people... Hello. Yeah, there's a seat here, and there's a seat back there. Now that's a man that looks like he fits in this room. Yes. He's dressed in the fashion that this... Okay. I think most people in this room did not need to be convinced about the fact that we're coming to a significant time. Not just the change of numbers, not just the change. Now we know there's significance. And it's very easy. There are a lot of people who do it. It's very easy to get carried away by all of these things. And you can say, hey, I'm born in a time where there's an exceedingly rare astrological, astronomical phenomenon. And you can identify with that if you want. But the really important thing to ask is, what does this mean? You know, somebody will hand you a horoscope and say, wow, that's really an interesting horoscope. And they'll say, but what does the horoscope mean? To say that it's fabulous, that it's got all of this and this, it's only meaningful when we can understand what we can do with it. When we can understand what is intended. It's perfectly possible for us to sleepwalk through every bit of life. For every day to be like every other day in our consciousness. It's the same, I'm the same me. It's possible to do that. I don't think it is a wise thing to do it. I think we have to always be giving ourselves to life in more intense, in more genuine, in more sincere ways, and in more subtle ways. I like to go for walks in the woods, and I enjoy myself, and it's pretty, and it feels good to be out in nature. But I often think, wow, what if I were going through the woods with an entomologist who could tell me what's going on with all the bugs? Or what if I were going through the woods with a botanist who could tell me what's going on with all of the plant life? Or what would what would it be like to be going through the same woods with a geologist who could be telling me about all the contours and how the sub-environments are produced? Or what would it be like going through this woods as a painter, being able to see all of the colors and the interplays of the colors with greater understanding and greater appreciation? This is what life is like. We're going through the woods every day, and we're not aware of the bugs, and we're not aware of the biology. We're not aware of all of the art that is going on. To some extent, we're sleepwalkers. And it really is to our spiritual betterment and to the spiritual betterment of the world to give ourselves to our lives every day, to give more to it. Now, we spent most of the afternoon trying to impart to you the fact that we live in important times, and we've done it in rather absurd ways. We've talked about things like numerology and mathematics, and we've talked about things like astrology. That happens to be the way that we get in touch with the fact, but at least I hope we have impressed the fact that these are significant times. Now the issue is, what can we do about these things? My father was a plumber, a small-town plumber, which meant that he had to be more than a plumber. And one of the things he had to do is he had to be his own bill collecting agency, because people always thought that the tradesmen had all kinds of money and they didn't need to be paid. And so it was sort of a friendly ritual. My father's a sociable man. It's kind of sad now. He lives in an apartment by himself with a whole bunch of other older people, but they're all younger than he is. He's 90 years old, and they don't want to go out with them. He wants to go out. He wants to have chums that he talks and does things with, and they won't do that. They're too fuddy-duddy. But he's a sociable guy, so he'd go around and visit people at their house and say, well, you owe me this much money. And if I heard it one time in my life, I heard it dozens of times. My father would look at the calendar and he'd say, well, the moon is going from new to full. I can go out and I can collect bills now. Because he had observed year after year that his success in collecting his bills was much better when the moon was going from new to full than it was when it was going from full to new. Now, we just said that we are in a major transition time. Everything is going from new to full relative to Pluto, and everything is going from new to full relative to Neptune, and to Uranus, and to Saturn, and to Jupiter when it gets to be the spring of the year 2000. This means that everything is going from new to full, and there's actually even going to be a new moon right at that time. This means that it's time to collect bills. It means that if we want to set out to do something positive for the world, to start something, that's going to be successful and that is going to accomplish something, this is the time to do it. And we're talking about not starting something that is some simple little thing. We're talking about something that could last for millennia. So if we want to take the Rosicrucian organization, by the way, this is sponsored by the Rosicrucian Fellowship. If we want to take the Rosicrucian organization and bring it out into the world and really build some kind of fellowship, this is the time to do it. If we want to renew and redeem theosophy and make it an assertive power in the world, this is the time to do it. In terms of starting things, in terms of accomplishing things, even those things that we may have done hundreds of times before and failed, this is a time to start or to restart with probably one of the greatest possibilities of success for many hundreds of years. This is big stuff. I was looking over my notes last night. I'm staying with Deanie, who unfortunately couldn't make it this afternoon. Tomorrow's her birthday, and she's got all sorts of things to take care of. But as I was going through this part of the notes, I started humming that song by Steve Allen. You know that song, "This Could Be the Start of Something Big"? That's really what it is. And I like quoting Steve Allen in these talks anyway, because he's a vociferous atheist, and the more I can quote him in spiritual talks, he's a lovable guy, but he's pretty much small-minded in some things. All right. Then the question is, what can we do? We know we can start something, or we can restart something, or we can confirm ourselves all over again and start all over again. But what can we do? Roughly speaking, just about anything. But we have to be more specific than that. And this is going to turn out to be a really microcosmic talk. Very, very little things. We often can't see what to do because we have taken the assumptions of the world so much into our consciousness that we are materially blinded. We walk around stupefied most of the time. 2 weeks ago, I took a walk in the woods. I took several walks in the woods. I walked in a young woods and got wild strawberries and heard a lot of birds singing. And then the next day, I went in a national wilderness area in northern Wisconsin called the Sylvania Wilderness Area. And there were big trees, second growth trees. The other Nicolay forest that I was in was third or fourth growth trees. And in the big forest, everything underneath is granite, and all of the trees were conifers. And they dropped the needles, so nothing was growing up underneath. It was like a canopy of all the leaves up above. You had to look way up in order to see any leaves. And I heard the same birds in both forests, and they sounded different. And I didn't recognize it. I was so much of a sleepwalker that it took me a half a week before it dawned on me what was going on. That when the birds sing in a young forest, all the leaves are there, and they diffuse the sound. And the bird song is beautiful, wonderful, but it's not the same as in the big forest. In the big forest, underneath the canopy, it's sort of like an echo chamber. And you hear the bird, and you're walking along in silence because you're walking on pine needles. And it's silent. And then you hear the bird song, and it sounds almost like the ancient Chinese poets. The difference between sound and silence is really punctuated. It's really, really clear. And it took me a half a week to learn one little thing from a walk. And that's because all of us are so locked into the world that we don't see what's going on, even though it's right in front of us. We need to be wakened. We need to have compassion. We need to have assimilated some pain and sorrow before we can really wake up to what is going on in the world. And so from here on in, we're going to talk just a very little bit about waking up and what we can do in this great waking up time. This is an initiation. It is an initiation for the world. And anybody who has ever studied initiation knows it is not a pleasant phenomenon. Most initiations, the candidate is initiated in the depth of illness, with all kinds of pain and suffering. For that very reason, they need to be shocked out of their materialistic, assuming attitude about the nature of the world. Plus, we have to have more soul material. We can only get that by getting our past destiny. Plus, we have to have more compassion. And unless we suffer some, we aren't going to have any compassion. And so all of those things are reasons why illness is so important to us. I feel very lucky and very blessed to have undergone some justified suffering for the last week. And I've seen something, you lay in your sick bed and you say, why me? And if you weren't feeling sorry for yourself when you listened, you'd hear why you. In my case, I was saying, why me? And images of my behavior came back to me. And I could see why me, why this happened. So the world is going through sickness, which is pretty obvious. We don't even need a millennial phenomenon to tell us that the world is a pretty sick place out there. But it's sick for the same reason, so that we develop compassion for each other, so that we reap soul material by assimilating from the comeback of all of our improper actions, and so that we get shocked out of our attachment to our sleeping, assuming attitudes of materialism. So that's basically what we're trying to get at. I want to talk about two symptoms of the world's suffering, just as examples, so that we can see what we're involved with. The first example takes the two extremes on the impersonal part of the ladder of the stars. That is the most far out planet Pluto and the most far in of the impersonal planets Mars. Pluto and Mars then together encompass a number of things. One of the attitudes they share is, or that they build on together, is one that we run into all over now, and that is rage. The world is filled with rage. And rage is something that normally in a person's life is something that happens at rare moments. We're not talking just about anger, but we're talking about deep rage. But now it's happening on almost a daily basis. We have everything from road rage, where people try to run other drivers off the road, to now the rage in little kids taking rifles and killing large numbers of people. Now I'm going to take a little divertimento here because I think it's really important. From the viewpoint of the mysteries, capital punishment is directly associated with mass murder. Capital punishment is directly associated with mass murder. That is the prisoner hates society already. And then when that prisoner receives capital punishment, they realize it isn't punishment. They realize it's social vengeance. Is it any surprise that somebody who is the subject of capital punishment would feel enraged and angry toward society? Now, if you put them in a prison, especially if you put them in solitary for long periods of time, and let them read whatever spiritual or moral book they want, not have them mingle and learn how to fight and become better criminals, but give them the time. It's the 12th house. The prison is the 12th house. Let them have the experience of the 12th house. That is where you retreat, and it's a cosmic timeout. But what happens is we figure it's the final thing is we can just get rid of them. And if we do that and somebody is out of the body with rage, they're much more dangerous to society than when they're in the body. Because if they're free in the inner worlds, they can find people who are weak, like some troubled young teenager. And they can bother them and bother them and bother them until they just indiscriminately go out and shoot people. And that's what's happening. If you watch very carefully, that as there is a rise in capital punishment, there has been a rise in mass murder, and there will continue to do so. It's a way, when you say capital punishment, you have given up on society. You're saying there's nothing we can do anymore. What happens to your bad habits if you say there's nothing I can do anymore? They run wild. If you give up on controlling your own bad habits, same thing happens to society. We can't ever give up. We're in this together, and it's eternal. And so what is happening is our society is filled with rage. When children, and we're talking children under puberty, that are getting loose with rifles and killing a large number of people, this is a sick society. Mars and Pluto together rule Scorpio. And Scorpio rules death, as we've just seen, but it also rules other things. It rules desire. If you look at yourself, I got to look at myself when I get angry. It's because I didn't get my way. We have this overweening pride, this self-importance. This driver can't get in my way. We never say enough. If I've heard it once, I've heard it dozens of times in the last several years. We can have it all. Yeah, you can have it all. You know what I'm trying to say? It is a desire that never quits. And there's nothing ever mentioned in society about patience. Nothing ever mentioned in society about giving or harmonizing or anything like that. I want it now, and if I don't get it, I get angry. And this is pandemic in society. And it's really shallow if it's going to take you 10 seconds on a freeway trip longer because somebody cut in front of you. To go into a rage over something like that indicates what a really shallow society, like we're killing ourselves over little stuff. It's a really, really sad thing. So, who are we to think that things should always go our way? Why does it have to be always our way? We need a little more of that kind of humility. So these, as we're approaching the increase of spiritual vibration, as we're approaching initiation of the world. What's happening is the pressure is going up and up, but we are not working on developing the things that we need to do. I individually have in this life, as one of the major works to do, is to learn to deal with desire. I must say I don't do a great job at it. I don't even do a good job at it. But fortunately, I do a better job at it. And I've tried working on this desire and that desire, but it's sort of like the heads of a hydra. You cut one off and 7 more come in their place. And it's a matter of learning to deal with the root principle of desire itself. And at this point, I'm working on it in such a way that I desire, no matter what the situation is, even in feeding myself, I'm trying to give rather than to take in desire. But what I'm wanting to say is I'm a fundamentalist in some ways, a very basics person. And in a few minutes, I'm going to pass out some really basic, simple pamphlets. They're from the Rosicrucian Fellowship, and they represent techniques for spiritual development, one of which is called retrospection. And the purpose of retrospection is to cleanse and redirect our desires and to bring about initiation in a small sense, day by day by day. And so one of the things that when we say, all right, we can see what's going on in the world, what can we do? The most important things we can do are to develop ourselves. Suppose everybody did start going wild with rage. A person who was psychologically composed, somebody who was peaceful and loving, would be of inestimable value. And we have been treated in the spiritual teachings to a wealth of wonderful things to develop ourselves, not just to make good people out of us, but so that we can help others. And the more that we can do the exercises, the spiritual exercises, day by day, to really transform and change ourselves, the better we are. I'll talk about one other symptom, and then you get to get read to for a few minutes. The second and last symptom we're going to talk about, though there are many, is something that has been increasing in our society, again, for at least 30-some years, and that is the phenomenon of depression. Depressiveness is almost everywhere. I'm finding it even in very good spiritual students becoming depressed, which should never, ever occur. Astrologically speaking, Saturn rules depression. Now, I realize there are many ways that depression can come about, some specific, some general, and I'm not trying to give a one answer fits all, but I just want to address one of the general ways, and that is the function of Saturn is to deepen. If there is depression, it indicates deepening is required. We call valleys depressions, or if we push a button, we say we depress it. Right now, the world is very shallow. The world thinks that this plane, the material plane, is all there is, that there's nothing more. We know different. We know that there is something within and beyond and behind this, that there are answers that are deep. There are answers that are meaningful, and that this is what the world needs. Materialism is kind of gross. And if you think about it, taking pills like Prozac to get rid of depression is, you see what I mean? It's relying on shallowness to cure shallowness. Now, I won't say that medication isn't a decent or helpful thing. In some cases, it is necessary. For some people, not to take their medicine is to mean something very, very serious could happen. But what we can do is we can practice concentration. We can practice deep thinking. We can practice deep feeling. We can go in and in and in, and there is no level of depth that we cannot reach to. It is ultimately satisfying that we can concentrate and penetrate through and come up with answers that are all of our own and that literally put us in touch with the divine. But in order to do that, we have to make a breakthrough. God is not going to talk to us over a loudspeaker or anything like that. We have to put our consciousness where the divine is, and that requires some work. All right. We're talking about the millennium, and we all have dreams about the millennium. And in a way, we all have a nostalgia for the millennium. And since I'm a bookstore owner and I love books, I'm going to read to you something that is a little bit profane, but it is about the millennium. And because I think even though it didn't come from one of the spiritual students, in fact, it even makes mockery of some things of spiritual things, it's by Julio Cortázar. And Julio Cortázar is an Argentinian intellectual. This was written in about 1957 or 1958. And Julio Cortázar was an expatriate Argentinian beatnik living in Paris. And this is a very unusual book. The first part of the book you read straight through, and then you have the option of reading the second part straight through or following the hopscotch. If you follow the hopscotch, you follow the number at the end of the paragraph, and it takes you back into the first part or jumps you all over the book as though you were playing hopscotch. And you read it, and it reads differently both ways. But this is a statement about the millennium. It's about 6 pages long, so I hope you don't mind bearing with my poor reading for a little bit, because it has a really essential thing to it. It's called moralania. And Moralani is a fake philosopher. Basically, what is this story about finding the millenary kingdom, an Eden, another world? Everything written these days and worth reading is oriented towards nostalgia, an Arcadia complex, the return to the great uterus, back to Adam, La Bonne Sauvage, and so it goes. Paradise lost, lost because I searched for you in my eternal darkness. And so much for islands, Musimil, or gurus if you have the cash for a Paris-Bombay flight, or simply picking up a coffee cup and looking at it all over, not like a coffee cup anymore, but evidence of the immense asininity in which we find ourselves, believing that this object is nothing but a coffee cup, while even the most idiot among the journalists assigned to give us a précis on the quanta, Planck and Heisenberg, knocks himself out in 3 columns explaining that everything vibrates and trembles and is like a cat about to take an enormous hydrogen or cobalt leap which will leave us all with our feet sticking up in the air. An uncouth way of expressing oneself, really. The coffee cup is white, the noble savage is brown. Planck was a formidable German. Behind all that, it's always behind. Convince yourself that this is the key idea of modern thought. Paradise, the other world, trampled innocence, which weeping darkly seeks the land of Hurlqua. In one way or another, everyone is looking for it. Everyone wants to open the door that leads out to the playground. And not just for Eden, not so much for Eden as much as to say goodbye or to leave the jet planes behind. Nikita's face or Dwight's face or Charles's face or Franco's face. The waking up to bells, the adjustment to the thermometer, the weather vane, the retirement from kicks in the ass. 40 years of rubbing one's behind so that it won't hurt so much. But it hurts just the same, and the tip of the shoe digs in a little deeper every time just the same, and each kick dredges up just one more moment, more the poor ass of the cashier, the second lieutenant, or the professor of literature, or the nurse. And we are trying to say that Homo sapiens is not seeking the door in order to enter the millenary kingdom, even though it would not be so bad, not really so bad at all, but so he can close it behind his back and wiggle his ass like a contented dog, knowing that the old horseshoe was left behind, breaking itself against the closed door, and that one can go ahead and unbutton his poor asshole and with a sigh straighten up and start walking among the posies in the garden and sit down to look at a cloud for 5,000 years, no less, or 20,000 if that is possible. And if nobody gets upset, he is lucky enough to stay in the garden looking at the posies. From time to time, among the legions of people going about with their asses exposed, there is one who not only might want to shut the door for protection against the kicks of the three traditional dimensions, plus the one supplied by the categories of understanding, or by that more rotten principle of sufficient reason and the other infinite drivel. But furthermore, these types believe, along with other madmen, that we are not in a world, that our venerable parents have set us on a course in the wrong direction, and we have to get off if we do not want to end up as an equestrian statue or formed into an exemplary grandparent, and that nothing is lost if one maintains as his end the value of proclaiming that everything is lost and that we have to start all over again, like the famous sandhogs of 1907 who realized one August morning that the tunnel under Mount Brasco was off course and that they would end up by coming out more than 20 yards away from the tunnel being dug by the Yugoslav sandhogs from Dubrovna. What did the famous sandhogs do? The famous sandhogs left their tunnel the way it was and came out on the surface, and after several days and nights of deliberation in various Piedmont bars, began to dig on their own and at their own risk in a different part of Mount Brasco. And they kept on going without worrying about Yugoslav sandhogs, and after 4 months they came out in the southern part of Dubrovna with no small surprise for a retired schoolteacher who saw them appear in his house at bathroom level. A praiseworthy example which the Dubrovna sandhog should have followed, although one must recognize the famous sandhogs had not communicated their intentions, instead of obstinately connecting with a non-existent tunnel, as is the case with so many poets leaning halfway out of the living room window late at night. And so one can laugh and think that it is not serious, but it is serious. Laughter has dug more useful tunnels by itself than all the tears on earth, even though it may be barely known to stiff-necked people, stubborn in their beliefs that Melpomene is more fruitful than Queen Mab. Once and for all, it would be good to arrive at a disagreement on this matter. Perhaps there is one way out, but that exit ought to be an entrance. Perhaps there is a millenary kingdom, but you don't storm a fortress by running away from an enemy charge. Until now, this century has been running away from all sorts of things. It has been looking for doorways, and sometimes it gets to the bottom of them. What happens afterwards, no one knows. Some have managed to see and have perished instantly, erased by a great black forgetfulness. Others have conformed to the small escape, the little house in the suburbs, literary or scientific specialization, travel. Escapes are planned. They become technologized. They are furnished with the modular or the nylon law. There are imbeciles who still believe that drunkenness is a way, or mescaline, or homosexuality, anything magnificent and inane per se, but stupidly elevated into a system, into a key to the kingdom. Now here comes the important part. There may be another world inside this one, but we will not find it cutting out its silhouette from the fabulous tumults and days and lives. We will not find it in either atrophy or hypertrophy. That world does not exist. One has to create it like the phoenix. That world exists in this one, but in the way that water exists in oxygen and hydrogen, or how the pages 78, 457, 3, 271, 688, 75, and 456 of the Dictionary of the Spanish Academy have all that is needed for writing a hendecibel by Garasquillo. Let us say the world is a figure. It has to be read. By read, let us understand generated. Who cares about a dictionary as a dictionary? If from the dictionary alchemies, osmoses, and mixtures of simples, there finally does arise a Beatrice on a riverbank, why not have a marvelous hint of what could be born of her in turn? What a useless task is his own barber repeating ad nauseum the bi-weekly trim, opening the same desk, doing the same thing over and over again, buying the same newspaper, applying the same principles to the same happenings. Maybe there is a millenary kingdom, but if we reach it, if we are it, it will probably not be called that anymore. Until we take away from time its whip of history, until we prick the blister made of so many utiles, we go on seeing beauty as an end, peace as a desideratum, always from this side of the door, where it isn't always so bad, where many people find satisfactory lives, pleasant perfumes, good salaries, fine literature, stereophonic sound, and then why worry oneself about whether the world is infinite or whether history is coming to its optimum or whether the human race is emerging from the Middle Ages and into the era of cybernetics? As far as everything else is concerned, one must be an imbecile, one must be a poet, one must have a harvest moon in order to spend more than 5 minutes on those nostalgias that can be handled so perfectly in just a moment. Every meeting of international tycoons, men of science, each new artificial satellite, hormone, atomic reactor crushes the false hopes a little more. The kingdom will be made out of plastic material. That is a fact. And the world will not have to be converted into an Orwellian or a Huxleyan nightmare. It will be much worse. It will be a delightful world to the measure of its inhabitants. No mosquitoes, no illiterates, with enormous 18-foot hens, most likely with each foot a thing of beauty, teleoperated bathrooms with different colored water according to the days of the week, in nicety of the natural hygiene services, with television in every room, great tropical landscapes, for example, for the inhabitants of Reykjavik, scenes of igloos for the people of Havana, subtle combinations that will reduce all rebellions to conformity, and so forth. That is to say, a satisfactory world for reasonable people. And will any single person remain in it who is not reasonable? In some corner, a vestige of the forgotten kingdom. In some violent death, the punishment for having remembered the kingdom. In some laugh, in some tear, in some survival of the kingdom, beneath it all, one does not feel that man will end up killing man. He will escape from that. He will grasp the rudder of his electronic machine, the astral rocket. He will trip up and they can set a dog on him. Everything can be killed except nostalgia for the millennium. We carry it in the color of our eyes, in our every love affair, in everything that deeply torments and unites and tricks. Wishful thinking, perhaps, but that is perhaps just another definition of the featherless biped. In short, we are becoming free. We are being initiated into complete freedom. Right now, much of our life is a matter of destiny. We don't have much choice about what history is going to deal to us. We do have choice about how we respond to it. Eventually, our lives will probably be much more like a chess game where we are in control and where we express ourselves freely and that we rise and fall on our living merits. The more that we proceed with life, the more it is, as Koepsel says, we must live the new millennium into existence. One moment is not the same as the last moment. Each moment has a flavor. Each moment offers an opportunity to live, to give ourselves in spirit to the moment. That is the work, and that is what our spiritual exercises are for. As simple as they may be, if we take and do our simple spiritual exercises with full sincerity, with full earnestness, day by day, we become a living being, and we live the reality into existence. A perfect person is not something that you look at like a mannequin. A perfect person lives every moment life, the spiritual gift that has been given to us. And that is what we are intending to do. The Bible tells us that we accomplish salvation by work and by prayer. I try to do as much as I can of both, and it turns out they're both work, and they're both wonderful. All I can say is that for all the work that we put in, it's exactly as Christ says it, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So I'm going to pass out a few little, very simple pamphlets on spiritual exercises. Help yourself to one, and the greatest gift that you could do to yourself and to me and to the world is in the millennium. Here we're talking about things that happen once in many thousands of years, but it's the little things that we can do each and every day that are the important things. Work. That's it. Questions? No. There are nice vibrations in here. I don't like clapping because it breaks up vibrations.
They're having trouble with the computer. It won't swallow the 3 zeros.
Yeah, we know that. Any questions or commentaries?
You think you're going to get that resurrected?
Resolved? Yeah, it will. Yes.
Is the Bible referring to like 20 years per generation?
Does the Bible refer to 20 years? I'm not familiar with that. I'm not enough of a biblical scholar to say. I know that the man who wrote that wonderful big book showing all the different theories of history, Toynbee. Toynbee thought that the ancients were right in saying that a generation was 20 years and that it was to be associated with the cycles of Saturn and Jupiter. I do know that Thomas Edison wanted to have the revolution every 20 years, and I think probably based on the same notion. What? I think 20, but I could be wrong. Yes.
One thing that's always strikes me as odd about this thing is we have what you call the outcome knowledge. So it sounds like there's like an Akash record or there's knowledge to be learned. But yet, in most cases, we are enjoined to essentially chop wood and carry water.
Yes.
The quest to learn the actual knowledge, to know what the rhythms are or the signs, in your experience, your position, is this an absolute requisite that you become acquainted with all the esoteric languages and the symbologies and know what they mean and what they're indicating, etc., or non-symbolic form in which you can...
Probably the more unsymbolic the better, but I'll give you a very unequivocal answer. Yes and no. If I understand your question, it's something to the effect of in order to become a complete human being and to become a completely free human being, is it necessary to learn all of the spiritual principles of the cosmos? And my answer to that is, in terms of